So in this chapter, I'm going to go into the center and axis and element mode. Again, I'm not going to go into every single combination because there's just too many of them. But basically all it is once again, as I've talked about before, every single action center or the action center overall and the axes basically is made of the axis element and the center element. So what that means is that I can align the axes separately from the center. So I can snap the center to wherever I want, whether it be the screen or whether it be a polygon or a vertex or an edge. At the same time, I can choose whether I want it to be anywhere on an edge or in a center of an edge or center of a polygon or anywhere on a polygon. You know, I have those choices. I can also make sure that the center snaps to another object altogether. You know, there's a lot of options that I have. So if I, for example, go to center auto and axis auto, it's basically the same thing as automatic. I can place it wherever I want. It's not exactly what, you know, that's probably the most flexible option. Now, obviously, if I choose the center selection, what's going to happen is whatever selection I make, that is where my action center will be snapped to. I can no longer click anywhere outside of my space because now the action center is locked to, as you can see, it's actually still locked to my selection. So the handles automatically move along with the, as you can see, my handles are automatically and constantly locked to the actual selection. If I change it to selection border, it behaves a little bit differently because as you've noticed before, if I do something like this, and I change the center to selection border, it's going to go to the open border. So basically, all these centers really are no different than anything that I've covered here. The only thing that I guess I should really go over is the axis, because if I have once again the selection border here, I can change the axis to lock to selection, and now you've noticed that the axes have realigned themselves towards an average normal direction. Or I can make the axis you know, align itself to an element. So if I choose this element, you still notice that the axis center is not changing. It's just that the angle of which the axes are aligned are, in fact, being realigned, depending on which polygon I pick or which edge I pick. They're constantly realigning themselves. So for example, if I pick this polygon here, the Z should actually be pointing in this direction. And as you can see, it is in fact pointing in that direction because it's aligned to that polygon, right? But the center is not moving because the center is locked to selection border. So it's always locked to the border of the selection, that open hole in the selection. If we change the axis to screen, it's always, or it should always be, if I click anywhere in my viewport, and I have to always click to update it somewhere in my viewport, you'll notice that the Y and you know, and X are always locked to my screen axis, regardless of where I go. Now, just like I said before, what's going on here is that the Z is always pointing towards a vanishing point. And again, I always have to click somewhere in the viewport to update that axis. Next one is origin. Origin, this basically just makes sure that it's always aligned to the world. Nothing special. And then I have the parent. Parent I've already described. Depending on where, you know, the axis of the parent, if it's misaligned or, you know, if it's rotated to a certain way, then it's going to pick up the parent's axis. And then you have local, which I've actually never used before, to be honest, in terms of selections like this. So I can't really explain that one. And then again, you have the pivot, which is mostly used for, you know, it's going to get the object's pivot's axis. So that's pretty much it for that. The only thing, I guess, the other thing I could explain is the element mode. All this is that if I, let's just say this, if I have my center locked to, I guess selection would be good. You know, I have something like this. My center is locked to this polygon, and then I choose the axis to be element. As you can see here, I can choose any element I want, and the axis will automatically snap to whatever polygon I want. But what if I choose something like, ooh, I don't know. Actually, you know what? I guess I would have to have my center set to element. Now, the reason for that is because right now, as you can see, what I can do is I can click anywhere on a polygon or anywhere on an edge. Notice how the manipulator is moving. It's locking itself to that element. But if I go to element mode and I choose auto center, then no matter where I click, it's always at the center of this edge. If I click here, it's always going to be at the center of this polygon, and obviously vertices only have a center. If I change it to something like vertex, it's going to make sure that I can't click on any polygons or edges. I can only click on vertices, and edges will only let me lock my center to, or lock my axis center to the edge, or edge center, or polygon center. These are really, really self-explanatory. So, you know, I hope that you guys learned a little bit about the action centers here. Again, all this is that the center controls the center of where the handles get snapped to, and the axis controls how these handles are aligned. So once again, if I go to the axis and I go to element, whoops, I go to element, then, and I obviously have to make sure that my element mode is set to auto or auto center. Then I can pick and I can realign this these handles completely separately, you know, and basically in the exact way that I want. But right now, you know, the center is set to element, so it's pretty much like using the element mode to begin with. But again, I could get much different kind of effects where I could maybe choose something like center origin, so my center will always be snapped to the origin, but I can realign it if I want by choosing, you know, other elements. Like for example, I could choose this polygon and I could realign the axes to the normal of that one polygon. So now the Z is pushing out, you know, it's pointing at the same direction that this polygon normal was pointing at, but the center is stuck to the origin. So that's it for this chapter. Cheers.